We don't serve vagrants here. Do you even know this is a high-end district? Got enough cash for coffee, old man? Or do you just want to sit inside for the air conditioning? The entire café chuckled. One customer pulled out their phone and began filming the older man being turned away. In the clip, he stood silently wearing a faded coat, limping slightly, clutching crumpled bills and a worn fabric cap. No one asked what he needed. No one knew that the entire city would be bowing its head to that very man within 24 hours. That morning, the sun was mild, the pavement was still damp from the night's rain. The city awoke to the sounds of honking cars, hurried heels on the sidewalk, and the rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee drifting from newly opened cafes on every corner. At a bustling intersection, where young people gathered for their morning selfies and check-ins, a brand new coffee shop was packed to capacity in just 2 weeks. Its signage gleamed, soft music floated through the air, leather chairs lined the spotless floor, and servers dressed in crisp white uniforms looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Everyone was well dressed. Everyone spoke in measured tones. Everyone understood this was a place for people with taste. Until an older man appeared. He wore a tattered coat faded, frayed at the shoulders. His gray khaki pants were wrinkled, the cuffs damp from brushing against puddles. His boots, clearly ex-military, were worn at the toes, with faded laces and red soil caked into the soles. He walked slowly, left leg dragging slightly. Each step carried the sound of something more than just footsteps. It was the echo of a life that had once walked through something distant, something no one here had seen. In one hand, he carried a folded fabric cap. In the other, a few paper bills were pressed flat and carefully tucked into his chest pocket. No one noticed. No one recognized him, not until he opened the cafe door. The soft jingle of the bell echoed just enough to make every head inside turn. The cool air inside the cafe was a sharp contrast to the gentle morning sun outside, and the sight of an old man in a faded coat, limping slightly, with a weathered face, walking into that sleek, polished space, it was like a wrong note played in a perfectly rehearsed symphony. A young waitress carrying a tray froze mid-step. She looked him over, head to toe. A brief flicker of surprise, a glance at her coworker. Then, a smirk appeared on her lips. A smile, but without warmth. The old man stepped up to the counter. He studied the menu for a moment, then asked, his voice raspy but calm, "One hot mocha, please." The cashier, a young man in his 20s, frowned, eyeing the wrinkled bills in the old man's hand. "Do you have a card, sir?" "No, I'll pay in cash," the old man replied. The cashier paused, then said loud enough for the entire cafe to hear, "We don't offer senior discounts here, sir." No one laughed out loud, just a few subtle headshakes, suppressed grins, and exchanged glances that said they were all watching a scene they hadn't expected on a quiet morning. A customer near the counter leaned toward his friend and whispered, "He looks so scruffy. Bet he thinks he can get a free coffee." His friend chuckled, then raised his phone and started recording. The clip was under 15 seconds long, but enough to clearly capture the old man's confused expression. Enough to catch the exact moment. He pulled out the bill carefully folded, perfectly pressed, as if he had planned this rare purchase for days. The cashier hesitated for a few seconds, then replied, "I'm sorry, but I need to verify your ability to pay first. We don't serve people whose financial status is unclear." The old man's voice remained calm, steady. "I'm only buying a cup of coffee." The young man glanced toward the manager, a woman standing behind the counter. She stepped forward, her expression professional, but her eyes betrayed clear annoyance. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't serve homeless individuals here. It might affect the experience for our other customers." The air inside the cafe shifted into a heavy silence, that particular kind of shame you feel for someone else, but don't act on. No one said a word to defend him. A young woman looked down, avoiding his gaze. An older man pulled out his phone, pretending to be busy. Meanwhile, the video had already been posted online. The old man quietly stepped back. He said nothing more, just nodded, then turned and walked out of the cafe with that same slow, limping gait, patient, deliberate, and without looking back. His name was Henry Marshall, 79 years old. He lived alone in a small wooden house on the edge of town, where no one knocked on the door anymore, except for the neighbor's cat that occasionally snuck over to nap on his porch. People in the neighborhood called him the quiet old man, not because he was grumpy, but because he spoke little, went out less, and was almost never seen around crowds unless someone needed help. He used to be a combat engineer, serving in Vietnam, then Bosnia, and finally in the Middle East during a supply route protection operation. No medals were announced on TV, no news articles were written. Just a few scars and an old military ID card tucked behind a photo of his late wife. His wife, Ellie, had been a military nurse. She passed away from cancer more than 15 years ago. Since then, he'd lived alone. No one ever heard him talk about war. He never boasted about being a veteran. If someone asked, he'd just answer gently. I used to work in the military, mostly driving water trucks, setting up tents, keeping roads clear. Then he'd change the subject. But the people who lived around him knew more than that. They knew that every morning. He walked over 2 miles to bring porridge to a blind elderly woman at the far end of the street. That the bike the widow's son rode to school each day was fixed by him, free of charge. The rusted iron cross on the nameless grave in the small cemetery was repainted every year by his own hand, with his old army green. He never did it for recognition, and never spoke of it again. One time, the neighborhood coordinator asked him why he helped so much, but never accepted anything in return. He just smiled softly and said, "A long time ago, someone saved me, and I never even knew his name. I figure, if you can do something for someone, just do it. Doesn't matter if anyone remembers." The only person who ever saw Henry cry was a neighborhood boy named Ben. One rainy afternoon, the boy had sneaked out to fish in the fields and fell, splitting his head. Henry ran out and carried him back in the pouring rain, whispering as he walked, "You can't sleep now, kid. I lost a brother once because he dozed off on the way back to base. He never woke up." After the boy was safe, Henry sat outside the hospital all night, his hands gripping his soaked cap, saying nothing. Only when Ben's parents came out to thank him did he stand, bow slightly, and walk away without a word. The next day, Ben told everyone in the neighborhood, "Mr. Henry is the kindest man I've ever met, but I think he carries a sadness no one ever asks about." And maybe Ben was right. Henry carried a sadness, an old one long as a war, heavy as an unfulfilled promise, quiet as the dragging limp he carried with him each day. When he came to the café, he didn't intend to make a scene. It was just, that day was his wife's memorial. He simply wanted to sit for a while, to drink a hot mocha the kind she used to make each morning in their little kitchen, to sit still, remember, and quietly go home. But even that cup of coffee, he never got to taste. A 14-second clip, no music, just the image of an old man, limping, wearing a faded coat, holding a worn cloth cap, being turned away at the coffee counter. The camera angle is slanted. A neon red caption flashes across the screen. Plot twist grandpa, cosplaying unemployed veteran begs for free coffee at a 5-star cafe. The video was posted by one of the cafe employees on their Instagram. Within 30 minutes, it had over 9,000 views. People started to share it. The comments rolled in, fast who let him outside dressed like that. Seriously, the way he held out that money looks more like a guilt trip scam than anything. Probably just got out of rehab. Sad, but still sketchy. Then someone reposted it to TikTok, adding a slow-motion segment of the old man turning away, with the caption, "When you forget to subscribe to the social respect package but try to enter the luxury world anyway." That version hit 50,000 likes in 2 hours. No one asked his name. No one wondered why he was there. They just saw a worn figure standing awkwardly beneath the glow of polished lights and decided he didn't belong. That afternoon, Henry sat alone on a park bench, still in the same clothes. Beside him was his cloth cap, and the same folded bill was still in his pocket. He didn't know the video was spreading, didn't know hundreds of people were laughing at the way he limped, didn't know his quiet, weathered face had been played back thousands of times, framed in judgment. He just sat there, still, not sad, not angry, just silent like every other day, because by now, he was used to it, used to a world that moves too fast to see the truth behind a faded coat. That night, Ben, now a college student, was scrolling through his phone when the clip appeared. It only took a second for him to recognize the man in the video. That's Mr. Henry, the one who carried me from the field to the hospital when I was a kid. Ben jumped up, called his father, now a local government officer, then the neighborhood captain, and finally the mayor's office. In each call, he said just one thing. If any of you still remember, then today, we just humiliated a man who once saved many lives. The next morning, the desk inside Mayor James Corbin's office looked different. An iPad was already propped open. The video titled "Old Man Causes Scene at Coffee Shop" played automatically. There was no music, just the soft tapping of a cane against the floor, and an old soldier being turned away. Not with words, but with the silence of those who stood and watched. The mayor stared intently, and when the old man's face came into frame, he froze. My God, that's him. His voice caught. That's Henry Marshall. The secretary leaned in quietly. Sir, do you know him? James Corbin didn't answer right away. He stood, walked out of the room, and said over the phone, cancel all meetings, get the press, and if I'm not wrong, we've got something today far more important than the Q3 budget. Within 2 hours, the entire local media had gathered in the City Hall lobby. Cameras rolled, microphones pointed, everyone waited, wondering what could be so urgent. Then, the mayor stepped onto the podium. No notes, no pre-written statement. He simply spoke with a voice that trembled. The man in the viral video is not a beggar, not some clueless old man. His name is Henry Marshall, a veteran who served in 3 of the most brutal campaigns of the last century. A man who once disarmed explosives with his bare hands to save a convoy of civilians. And the same man who saved my life during the construction landslide back in 1994. The packed room fell silent. The mayor went on. He never told anyone. He didn't accept medals, never asked for thanks. And yesterday, we mocked him, simply because he wasn't wearing the kind of jacket this society approves of. One reporter wiped away tears. Another stared down at their keyboard. Even the live stream moderator had nothing left to say. The mayor concluded, I hereby declare from this day forward, today will be known as Henry Marshall Day, a day for our city to bow its head in honor of a man who once stood in the middle of war, so that others could live in peace, never knowing his name. At that same moment, the doors to the café where it all began shut tight, not by government order, not because of protest, but because no one walked in anymore. Each customer had a reason. But the truth was, in their eyes, you can't sip coffee in a place that once kicked out a hero, just for wearing old clothes. The owner and staff issued a public apology. They knelt before cameras, posted statements, sent letters to Henry's home, but he didn't speak. He didn't talk to the press. He didn't attend the city's tribute. The only person who heard from him that day was Ben. The message had just 9 words. Thank you, kid, for still remembering who I am. A week after the press conference, a small bronze plaque appeared outside the city's military cemetery. It bore just 2 lines. Henry Marshall, a hero who never needed a welcome, only to be remembered by name. No one knew who requested it. No one knew who paid for it. Only the neighborhood watch captain said that Mr. Henry had stopped by, handed him a note, and then disappeared the way he always did, without warning, without asking, without needing anyone to say goodbye. People still talk about him, but not with fancy hashtags, not with reenacted videos. They remember him by changing how they see him. A little tea stand at the alley now has a sign. Here, you don't need to dress well. You just need to live kindly. A high school in the city introduced a new lesson at the start of the year. Respect 101. Never judge someone by how they look. If this story made you pause, even just for a moment, please share it, because somewhere out there, many Henry Marshalls are still being overlooked, right in plain sight. And if you found this story meaningful, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one.